Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Once again, a big thank you to our legendary ambassador and the Naija7Wonders team for this opportunity. Also acknowledge my fellow speakers, our industry leaders in the room, and my contemporaries and colleagues within and outside the industry. I see some of my friends are invited outside of travel that are here. Thank you for coming. All right, so after last year's Detty December, I decided to do some traveling across the continent in the past 2 months to get new business for my company. So I spent the past 2 months meeting with prospects in Casablanca, Marrakesh, Tangier, Chefchaouen, Addis Ababa, Joburg, Cape Town, and Nairobi. Now, these were not just citizens of these countries, but they were also visiting tourists who are Americans, Dutch, Bulgarians, and of course, I started pitching Detty December, alongside my other businesses. And thankfully, they had heard about the nightlife through Afrobeat channels in their countries, right? The concerts on Instagram, and even through their Nigerian friends abroad. And they told me they were curious. They were excited. They were ready to come last year. But guess what? They did not. So I asked why. The reason was, interestingly, after conversations across board, was not because of visas, was not because of the flight costs or government policy, but because a Nigerian in their world talked them out of it. What struck me was this. Different countries, different demographics, different people, but same story across board. And that occurred to me that this is not a coincidence. This is a pattern. Now, let's put a pin on that. I'll come back to that. I want us to revisit some of the numbers that came out of the last experience last December, and 100 billion plus, massive hotel occupancy, flights packed. And as we have established in the past editions of this conference, right here, these numbers are true. So I'm not here to dispute that. However, those numbers don't tell you about the people who almost came and did not. And that gap is where the next opportunity is hiding. And again, let's put a pin on that. So this is my postulation this afternoon, everyone, and which is an uncomfortable truth. Detty December is not yet a global tourism product as of today. It is right now a diaspora homecoming at scale. And those are not the same thing. From data and research, which I did in the past few months, over 90% of visitors are Nigerians in diaspora, which means that what we are seeing is emotional travel, or I call it nostalgia travel. So it is not a global destination selection, so to speak. And the real question I'm asking myself and everyone here is, or the real question is not how many people came, but the real question is how many were genuine international leisure tourists who chose Nigeria as a first option, the same way a British would choose Bali or an American would choose Mexico. And the answer is it's just a fraction. The overwhelming majority were Nigerians in diaspora coming home, which means something important, that we do have not a demand problem, but a conversion problem. And from everything I've seen in the past 2 months, my travel, I believe that Detty December is being held back by what I call the 4 conversion gaps. First, the perception gap. Simple. What people hear about Nigeria versus what actually exists. So I'm simplifying it. The second gap is the trust gap. Fear of safety, scams, unpredictability, right? The third thing is the access gap, visa friction, logistics, complexity, and all of that. And finally, the experience gap. Lack of structured, export-ready, predictable tourism products, for example, time of commute between various experiences. Like my colleague said the other day, when you finish an experience in a hotel and you are going to a landmark, or you are going to Bogobiri, or you are going to Africa Shrine, and when sometimes these pre-scheduled events are cancelled. So that experience gap is major. However, the truth is, despite these gaps, the way they exist, demand is leaking. And the issue is not lack of interest, but the lack of being able to fill these gaps as of today. Now, let me go one level deeper into this conversation. Again, Nigeria does not just have a perception, and I'll come with my examples. I'm trying to just lay a framework for this, foundation for this. Nigeria does not just have a perception problem externally, which we can't dispute. We have a belief problem internally. And I'll say that again, because you cannot sell a country you are subtly and consistently apologizing for. That is what's happening every day. The foreigner expresses interest, and instead of curiosity being nurtured, it is being shut down by another Nigerian saying, don't go, it's not safe, you regret it. And just like that, the journey ends before it begins. So again, as of today, we have become an unintentional filter against our own opportunity. So what do we do? Two things, and I'm proposing this today in this conference. One is by the government and the other by the private sector. One, I believe that we need a deliberate Diaspora Ambassador Programme. Again, a deliberate Diaspora Ambassador Programme. Now, this is not another government campaign. I propose it to be a structured, incentivized framework that turns Nigerians abroad into active advocates, not just passive detractors. Again, for my visit to Morocco, we do this. Rwanda, Ghana, doing this for years. And interestingly, Nigeria, we have the biggest and the most globally distributed diaspora. We are currently sitting on the world's most powerful tourism sales force today, and we have not yet fully activated it. So I'm calling on the government using this platform, and I know that there are lots of government officials here as well, to make this happen. That's my first recommendation. The second is the private sector curation, which I'm a part of. I tell my team members and my colleagues in Travel Massive and companies I belong to, we have to stop waiting for Nigeria to be perfect. In your own little way, sell your version of Nigeria, which I do actively. While doing that, we must learn to tell balanced stories. Not denial, not exaggeration. I call it intelligent framing. Because perception is not cosmetic, it is economic. Now, let me bring this back to business, because I experienced this directly. Last December for us was profitable, to be honest. I wouldn't want to bore you with my company's shaking revenue. When you compare it to Wakana and the Quota, they dropped the B word in the last conferences. However, that's the billion naira word. However, our revenue told a very clear story, while reviewing with my team. The biggest spenders were diaspora Nigerians, from observation. They're earning foreign currency, and they're spending emotionally at home. However, our international tourists, clientele base were very few. However, again, they required enormous hand-holding, pre-arrival briefings that we did, itineraries, security arrangements, manage expectations, and we have to reassure them over and over and over and over. So again, we see this not as a stumbling block, but an opportunity. So in other words, what we are proposing for the private sector is build for trust, build for clarity. I tell my team, clarity is kindness. Build for ease and build for experience. Now, as I wrap up, allow me to put forward some future projections about Detty December, which has been on my heart, and I'm so glad I'm able to do this. In the next 3 years, one of two things will happen, right? Either Nigeria will structure Detty December into a true global tourism export consciously on a national scale, or other African countries will replicate the model, refine it, and outperform us. Because the truth is, the idea is already out. The question is, who will execute it better? And this is not just wishful thinking. It is happening already. I mean, last quarter, end of the year, last year, our company was engaged by the Ministry of Tourism and Culture, Sierra Leone, to help in bringing in artists from Caribbean and the US. So they had this One Nation Reggae Festival. It was not as big, and a lot of people didn't really hear about it, but people are doing things in smaller scales across the continent. Something I've learned in business is it is not the big that eats the small. It is the fastest that eats the lowest. So it's about speed. So let me close with this, ladies and gentlemen. Detty December is not proof that we have arrived. It is proof that the world is watching. It is proof that demand exists, but demand is not enough. And that demand must be converted. And the bridge between interest and action is three things, like I mentioned earlier: trust, access, and experience. And most importantly, I'm calling on the government again. Nigeria's greatest tourism asset is not just our culture or our festivals. It is our people. The millions of Nigerians across the world who have the power to invite the world in. That's my experience in the past 2 months. So the question is, what are they saying? Because if we get it right, Detty December will stop being a moment on the calendar, but a full-on all year round industry. Thank you so much for your time and attention.